Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics. Well, there really is only one major political talking point this week. David Cameron has fired the starting gun on the long-awaited referendum on whether we stay or leave the European Union. We'll be discussing the case for and against and what it could all mean for Kent. Joining us in the studio are two Conservative MPs who, it's fair to say, are at opposite ends of the argument. We'll shortly be hearing from Ashford MP Damian Green, who wants us to stay, and South Thanet MP Craig Mackinlay, who wants us to quit. Thank you both for joining us. But first, what could be at stake for Kent businesses and our economy? Josie Hannett has more.
Kent's MPs have shown a division in their thoughts as to whether the UK should remain in the European Union. And though some Kent businesses may be on the fence, Ashford-based MJ Allen supports the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign. The company exports around a quarter to a third of its machined products to Northern Europe. Its UK customers also export, meaning around 80% of the business's machinery ends up abroad.
My concern is that if the UK does leave the European Union, then those trade agreements that we currently have will get messed up. We could end up having to pay tariffs and duties and extra paperwork, things that make us less competitive, and that could potentially put my sales at risk and therefore put my employees at risk. So whilst there's a lot of things wrong with the EU, I'm not a fanatic EU supporter. The status quo is the thing that is most important to me and to my employees.
That's one side of the argument from the business community, but what about the smaller ones who make up much of Kent's economy?
A lot of smaller businesses might not even really be that bothered because they might say, well, I'm a bakery, I work in Maidstone selling to people in Maidstone. Really, if we're part of the European Union or not, doesn't really affect me because I'm working in a small business.
With the poll just a few months away, there's a lot at stake for Kent businesses. But will they be chained by EU red tape, or will they find new ways of growing their business if we leave?
This is Josie Hannett for KMTV in Ashford.
Well, Craig Mackinlay, a key issue there is fear amongst businesses that they'll lose access to very important markets if we leave the EU. What's your reaction?
Well, I'd say there is nothing to fear from leaving the EU because there is a global world out there. You know, are we really to believe that the owners of BMW, Mercedes, the Danish bacon industry, are they going to stop selling us their products if Britain were to leave the European Union? I don't know if you're the same as I am. I buy products because they're the right price and the right quality, and I'm sure that's the same of Mr. Allen. He provides a fantastic product at the right price. Why should being a member of this club make any difference to that normal business transaction? And don't forget, we run a huge deficit in trade with the EU. I think they would be the first hammering on the door to say, please Britain, let's continue this free trade agreement. It's good for both of us. So that would be whether Britain stayed in the EU or left the EU. And in so doing, we would have the opportunity of looking, expanding our horizons and looking around the world.
Damian Green, Craig's making the point that the UK is big enough to stand on its own 2 feet without being a member of the European Union. What do you say to that?
It's a question of balance of advantage, and Tim Allen is completely right. He's a classic manufacturing business, internationally competitive. The last thing he needs is uncertainty. And even if we could get as good terms as we get now, which I suspect we wouldn't, just psychologically, the other countries in the European Union would not take kindly to Britain pulling out. Why is it not in the interests of German, French manufacturers to say, let's try and tweak the terms of trade a bit so they're put at a disadvantage? Even if we could get that, it would take us years to get there. That uncertainty would stop inward investment, it would chill growth in our economy, and it would cause damage. And of course, being a member of the European Union doesn't stop us trading with the rest of the world. The Germans, for example, are extremely good at trading with China. They do better than we do. So anything that's holding us back from trading with the rest of the world isn't our membership of the European Union. We need to look at our own issues there, training, competitiveness and so on, and deal with those domestically.
Now, we're only a week into the campaign, as months ago. It strikes me there's been a very negative campaign on both sides, actually, but on the pro-EU side, there's a lot to talk about, a leap in the dark, uncertainty, it's a risk not worth taking. But back in the 1970s, people didn't know what would happen if we joined the EC.
Well, when we first had the referendum in '75, we'd already been a member for 2 years, so it was slightly different. But the truth is, there are risks. You know, we know now what in looks like. We've seen David Cameron's renegotiation. We've got what he wanted on things like benefits, on things like ending the commitment.
Well,
to have a
you
closer
say on
union.
benefits there, and I'm sure Craig's got a different opinion about the achievements on benefits. He didn't really deliver what you promised in your Conservative manifesto.
He delivered a very strong package, which is more than people thought he could deliver, which makes significant changes in many areas, and which is bound in an international law agreement registered at the United Nations, so it's irreversible. Britain has a veto on whether it can be changed or not, all of which people doubted. And there are risks. You don't need to listen to me, you can listen to manufacturers like Tim Allen. There are huge risks in threatening to pull out.
Craig Mackinlay, one of the suggestions has been that if we vote to stay in, or if we vote to stay out rather, then we'll see illegal migrant camps cropping up in Folkestone and Dover.
This is, I'm afraid, some of this what we call Operation Fear, that we're going to hear too much of. You won't hear it from me. I'm trying to extol what the virtues could be of a global independent Britain, saving all that money that we currently give to the EU, and stories like the migrant camps on the south coast of Britain, I'm afraid, was a shameful story.
Damian Green,
because let's get to the heart of why we've got problems in France. The French authorities are not dealing with these migrants according to their international obligations. They should be treating these people fairly and honestly and decently, and either assessing them as proper asylum seekers or dealing with them as economic migrants. To think that if they were to come over to Britain, we'd end up with migrant camps, I'm afraid is fear story of the worst order, and I don't think it does the inside any good to be peddling that type of story.
Damian Green, it's a classic bit of black political propaganda, isn't it? Smoke and mirrors, raising something which is not really the case.
It's perfectly possible that the French, we signed a treaty with France 12, 13 years ago to enable us to have our border in France. It benefits us more than it benefits the French. The reason there are camps at Calais is that they can't get across our border in Calais. If the French said, as they may well write, this is a perfectly realistic proposition.
But it's nothing to do with treaties we've got with the EU. It's just a bilateral treaty.
Absolutely, it's a bilateral treaty that was signed between two member states of the European Union. The French, particularly the French local politicians, don't like it at all. They've called for our borders to be moved back here. And if people came to Dover, of course, they could claim asylum when they get here. And the international agreement that Craig referred to that says they should claim asylum in the first country is, of course, the Dublin Convention, which is an EU treaty.
That Germany has ripped up.
So you couldn't rely on it outside the EU.
Germany's ripped that agreement up, as you well know.
Okay, well,
it looks
like we're not going to get much consensus here on this particular point. We've got to move on. We've got another package to show you guys. Now, with all talk from both sides of the argument, we sent Lauren Meakin to the streets of Medway to find out how much we know about the workings of the European Union. Here's what she found out.
Do you think it's true or false that bendy bananas are banned by the EU?
Bendy bananas? No, never heard of it. Don't know what you're talking about.
False.
Partially true.
Not even real?
What's a bendy banana?
It could be. I don't really know, but I wouldn't have thought so.
Was it true or false that farmers under EU law were forced to buy toys for their pigs?
I don't know, I don't think so.
Human rights laws would disappear?
No, because it's part of the European Court of Human Rights. It's nothing to do with the EU.
What's the EU?
It's true or false that British expats living in European countries under the EU, would they then become illegal immigrants?
No, that wouldn't happen.
I'm not too sure about that, really. I'm not really too sure.
Yeah, they'd have to come back. All the expats would have to come home.
If we left the EU, what do you think will happen to Premier League football players that are from Europe? Do you think they would leave? True or false?
I would think that's false.
Could we leave the EU in a day? What do you think?
No, I think it'll take a long time.
True or false?
I think that's false.
True or false that the EU have banned bagpipes?
Obviously false.
It's true if it's like a noise pollution thing. If they play it over 8 hours for a long
Over 8 hours? Who play bagpipes for over 8 hours?
So do you think it would be true or false that if we left the EU, 3 million jobs would disappear?
Do I have to give 3 or 4? So we just don't know, do we?
Unsure of that one. Would they disappear?
I don't think so. I think they'll get more jobs. Not sure on that one.
With a date set for the referendum, the only thing we're sure of is that we're a little bit confused.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for that.
This is Lauren Meakin for KMTV.
Well, that's fun, but it does reflect genuine confusion about the European Union. Damian Green, whatever else you say about the EU, it's got a pretty bad PR image, hasn't it?
Well, I think what you discover from that is that it's not got an image at all, that people don't know.
Well, that must be a big worry for you. You're
it.
extolling the virtues of being a member of the EU, and this is what people think about it.
And it's true that when you look at, if you ask people to rank in order of importance in their lives, 12 political things, the EU always features at the bottom, and it's one of the interesting things people have said actually in the early weeks of this campaign, that they feel they just don't have enough information to go on to take a decision one way or the other. And I keep assuring them that by the time we get to June the 23rd, boy, will you have had enough information about the EU. I think we'll all know enough.
Probably too much.
But I think the more information you have, what you do is bust some of the sort of silly myths about straight bananas and cucumbers and all that kind of thing.
Well, Craig, this sort of stuff is grist to the mill for the Out campaign, isn't it? But there's a serious point here. People have got a very poor image of the EU, and if we stay, what kind of things would you like to see changed to try and challenge this kind of image?
What I like about referendum period is that people will have these type of debates. It will be on the television, and as Damian said, we'll probably be absolutely heartily sick to death of it by 23rd of June. But it does give us the opportunity to wonder what this EU was all about, where it's going, because I think people need to be clear. This isn't a pause button, this referendum. Our EU partners have a very clear vision of where they want this to go. And to me, that is the uncertainty, because their vision is very clear. They want a full country called Europe, with a very deeply ingrained euro. And you really have to ask yourself, I think this is the key question. If the EU was presented today and we weren't members, would you be wanting to join it? Well, and I think this referendum period is so important that people will get the fact from the fiction, and they can make their own minds up. Because for too long, this argument has been in the corridors of Westminster. It's now going to be in people's front rooms, and they can decide for themselves.
Well, Cameron would say...
And I think we'll agree on that,
Cameron
David.
would say we've got a deal which means we aren't going to have ever closer political union, so that's safeguarded in the Cameron deal.
Well, if you really want to look at this, there's legal opinion out just over the last couple of days about how robust this deal is. Does it actually hold water? Will the European Court of Justice be able to overturn it? Will a new treaty ever actually come to bear? To me, I was in listening mode about, yes, there was potentially a deal available that returned us to the free trade and friendship that we're all about.
You made up your decision even before David Cameron.
No, I made my decision, and when I first said what side I was likely to be on, and it hasn't changed, was the Donald Tusk letter of 10th of November. If that was the high watermark, to me that didn't represent fundamental renegotiation, and to me that was important. We haven't got that, and frankly, I think this debate is going to reduce to dancing on a pinhead about the level of in-work benefits to Polish migrants, and it should be a lot more than that.
Your former leader has said it's a failed project. Michael Howard today saying he'll be supporting Brexit.
Yeah, well, I disagree with Michael about that. And indeed, you're right, that those who are arguing that there's some sort of plot to smuggle Britain into a United States of Europe, there never has been such a plot. But now we have an explicit agreement that the phrase ever closer union, which Eurosceptics have been complaining about for years as an example, as evidence of this alleged plot, we're now specifically exempt from that. So that's quite important. Where I do agree with Craig is that as the referendum approaches, I think the debate will become much more broad brush, won't be about the details of the renegotiation, will be about what type of country we want to live in, and a country where not just business people say we want access to the single market, we want to play a part in the rules of that single market, not just have those rules imposed on us, which is what happened outside, but other people like environmentalists in particular say we gain huge things from being a member of the European Union.
Well, we've got months ahead of us. Well, thanks very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for at this particular point. That's all from us at Paul on Politics. Thanks to our guests for coming in. You can catch up on all the latest political news by following me on Twitter at Paul on Politics. We'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.